All set.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2:00 by my clock, and we will, I will open the meeting for the Audit and Finance Committee for November. I'll call the meeting to order. And now I will entertain a motion for the adoption of the agenda or any alterations to the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Pull up the October 5th, 2021 minutes. Are there any changes or to the minutes? I'll entertain a motion that the minutes be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the fiscal year 21 financial results, I think we have a, Donna, are you make an introduction?
Introduction. Thank you very much. So we have Emily Sobczak, audit partner for our new external audit firm, Green Finney, to present the results of operations, financial operations from fiscal year 21. And I will remind the Audit and Finance Committee before she makes her presentation that, like in recent past years, what she's going to present this afternoon would be preliminary results. The firm is close to wrapping up their work. However, we are required by state statute to submit financial statements on no later than December 1. And so there would not be an opportunity for her to come back to the committee before then. What she and I have agreed to is that if there are any substantial changes from what she presents this afternoon, then I will make arrangements for a special call meeting for her to come back. Otherwise, I would like permission for the committee for us to go ahead and submit the financial statements on December 1, and she will be back to the full board, do a presentation to the full board in December. And so that is consistent with at least the last 3 years how we've operated. So with that, then I'd like to turn it over to Emily for her to present the results from fiscal year 21. Emily.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Emily Sobczak. I'm the audit partner with Green Finney that oversaw the financial statement audit for the district this year. Before I get into my presentation, I'm going to share, you should have in your agenda packet this little one-page kind of summary of some of the common acronyms that we use. I know that sometimes we in the auditing world can get caught up in our lingo and might be throwing around terms that you have no clue what they mean. And so hopefully if there's anything, any of these acronyms that as I go through the presentation or certainly in the financial statements, hopefully this will help out a little bit with that. All right. Now, okay. So before we get into the financial results for the district, I do like to remind you that when it comes to your financial statements, both the balances and the disclosures included in the report, that is the responsibility of the district. And so in order to ensure that that financial information that's being provided at year end for audit purposes, but also that's being provided throughout the year so that you can make good strategic decisions on behalf of the district, in order for that information to be relied upon, you need to have good, effective internal controls in place and strong policies and procedures that properly address the risks that the district is facing. And so it's important that that when you design the policies and procedures, that's not just a one-time thing, that you continually each year make some updates and revisions to, again, to mitigate risks as they change. Our responsibility as your auditor is to audit the financial information provided and issue an opinion based on that audit. Our opinion this year is an unmodified opinion. That opinion provides reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So that's the opinion that you want. That's a clean opinion, the one you want to receive. It is important, though, to remember that we're providing reasonable assurance, not absolute. So it's a high level of assurance but not absolute, because we're not looking at every single transaction that occurred during the year. And we are using some professional judgment in determining what we consider to be material to your financial statements. We also are required to gain an understanding of your internal controls. However, we are not giving an opinion based on the effectiveness of those controls as it relates to the financial statement audit. We do design our procedures based on risk assessment. So areas that we consider to be a little riskier than others, we will place increased emphasis on during our audit process. So looking at your financial results, you have an increase in your general fund balance of 1.2 million, bringing total fund balance in the general fund to 146.4 million as of June 30th. Now included in that amount is 6.4 million that's classified as non-spendable. And that is due to the assets being in non-spendable form. This relates to inventory as well as to prepaid expenses. You then have 67.8 million in committed fund balance, and this is committed for future operating needs. And that's in accordance with the board policy that was revised just about a year ago. Your assigned fund balance includes 21 million for mission critical initiatives as well as for the fiscal 2022 budget. And so then when we take out those designated amounts, we're left with unassigned fund balance of 51.2 million. That represents 9% of your 2021 actual expenditures, or about 8% of your budgeted fiscal 2022 expenditures. And we like to kind of put that in perspective by comparing it to the operating expenditures so that you can see how healthy your fund balance is. And to provide kind of a general benchmark, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of about 2 months of unrestricted fund balance. And so that would be looking at your unassigned, assigned, and committed. And then, like I said, the district did change its fund balance policy about a year ago to require 12.5% of your operating expenditures in your committed fund balance, and then no less than 4% in your unassigned fund balance. So you are in compliance with that policy as of June 30th. There are a number of different reasons why having that healthy fund balance is so important. One reason is to help with cash flows. We're measuring fund balance at June 30th, but your property tax revenues, which of course are a significant revenue source for the district, those won't start coming in until the very end of the calendar year. And so having a healthy fund balance allows you to better meet your cash flow needs without having to issue significant short-term debt. Having a healthy fund balance also allows you to make better discretionary choices in programs that you maintain. When funding sources change, it allows you to kind of maintain the same level of services that you'd like to maintain. Another important factor is when you're issuing debt, you certainly get better interest rates when you have a healthy fund balance and a strong fund balance policy. And so it can save you significant money in interest costs over the years. So now we'll look at your general fund activity. You had total revenues of 556 million for 2021. That was a 3% increase from the prior year, primarily related to property tax revenues, as well as your state revenues. And you came in 33.8 million better than budget. So better than budget by about 6%. And again, that was primarily related to the property tax revenues and the state revenues. In the general fund, you also report budgeted scheduled transfers in of 16.2 million. On the expenditure side, you have just under 570 million for the year. That was an 11% increase from the prior year. And that increase was primarily in your personnel costs. So you did give a 2% step increase for the fiscal year. You also gave a 2% cost of living adjustment. And then of course you had the 2 approved bonuses in October of last year and then May of the current year. And while your expenditures were higher than the prior year, they were still about 2% under what you had budgeted. So let's look at your other funds, your special revenue funds. You've got 3 special revenue funds that are primarily used to report the use of restricted federal and state funding. So you have your special projects fund, which has a fund balance of 8.6 million as of year end. That fund balance is assigned for special programs. And your revenues for the Special Projects Fund totaled about $93.2 million for the current year. And that, again, is state and federal funding. Your EIA fund reports state funding from the EIA Act. You had revenues of $30.7 million at year end. And this fund does not report a fund balance, as any unspent funds are required to be deferred and used in the subsequent year. And then finally, you have your Food Service Fund, which had revenues of $24.5 million. The majority of those, of course, are your federal reimbursements for the breakfast and lunch programs. And the Food Service Fund had a fund balance of $1.1 million at year end, about half of that in inventory and the remainder restricted for food service. Your Capital Projects Fund had a fund balance of $27.7 million at year end. That fund balance is restricted for future capital projects because this fund is funded through revenues from the local 1 cent sales tax revenues. Those revenues did increase again for fiscal 21 and totaled about $127 million for the year. Then you have your Debt Service District Fund. This reported a deficit fund balance of $37 million. Remember, typically when we're looking at your fund level financial statements, we're focused on current assets and current liabilities. So we don't typically report things like capital assets or debt on your fund level statements. However, there is a quirk of governmental accounting that says that if you issue short-term debt, then that debt should be reported at the fund level. And so you have about $66 million in outstanding bond anticipation notes that are reported on the Debt Service District Fund as liability as of June 30th. And so that's what's driving that deficit. On the Debt Service C Fund, you reported a fund balance of about $450,000. The C Fund reported debt service payments on the outstanding CEF bonds of about $35 million, and those are funded through transfers from your Debt Service District Fund. Now we'll talk a little bit about the long-term assets and long-term obligations that are reported at your government-wide level. So as is consistent with the past several years, we are required to report your proportionate share of the state's unfunded actuarial pension liability. So this relates to your participation in the state retirement systems. This liability does not impact your fund level financial statements. It's only reported at the government-wide level. And it's important to remember that this liability is an actuarial liability. And so that means that it's based on a number of different estimates and assumptions. This is not a liability that you're ever expected to write a check to pay off. What you are expected to do is to continue to pay the required employer and employee contributions at the rates mandated by the state. And that's important to remember because those rates have been increasing for about the past 10 years now. And so the rate of 15.5% for fiscal 21, it is consistent with the prior year because it was frozen due to the pandemic. However, it has increased again by an additional 1% for fiscal 2022. So for fiscal 22, we're looking at a rate of 16.5%. And that rate is scheduled to continue to increase by 1% annually until we reach a rate of 18.5% for fiscal 2024. And as you know, the district's budget, your operating expenditures, the majority of those are in personnel costs, about 70%. And so when these fringe rates are increasing so significantly, that will have a significant impact on your budget. And so it's very important to keep that in mind as you're making personnel decisions and long-term budgeting decisions. Very similar to the pension liability is the other post-employment benefits liability. This relates to your participation in the state retiree healthcare plan. Just like the pension liability, it is an actuarial liability. It is your proportionate share of the total unfunded actuarial liability for the plan. And so again, while that is a large number, $604 million, it is not a liability that you're expected to write a check to pay off, and it is not reported on your fund level financial statements. Your state mandated contribution rate for this plan is 6.25%. That is consistent with the prior year, and it will remain the same for fiscal 2022. So now looking at some more traditional assets and obligations, you have capital assets of 1.7 billion as of June 30th. That is an increase of close to 52 million from the prior year as your capital additions exceeded depreciation expense. Some of your more significant capital projects that were completed during the year include the C.E. Williams and Camp Road Middle Schools, Lucy Beckham High School, Cooper River Center for Advanced Studies, and the District 4 Stadium. On the long-term obligation side, you have total long-term obligations of 584 million as of June 30th. That is a decrease from the prior year due to your scheduled principal payments. You had a couple of new bond issuances this year. You had the 2020 GO bonds at just under 92 million. Those were issued to finance the payments on the CEF debt. And then you had the 2020 CEF installment purchase revenue refunding bonds of about 157 million. Those were issued to advance refund a portion of the 2013 CEF IPRBs, and those resulted in a reduction in your total debt service payments over the next 10 years of 16 million. So really taking advantage of the good interest rates that we have right now. You made principal payments of about 128 million during the year, and you have short-term bond anticipation notes outstanding of 215 million as of June 30th. Those will be repaid, some in November, this current month that we're in, and then the remainder in May of 2022. We did issue one new accounting standard this year. It's GASB number 84, which provides new guidance for fiduciary activities. And the result of the implementation was that your pupil activities fund, which has traditionally been reported as an agency fund or fiduciary fund, that was required to be moved to a special revenue fund. And so it is included in your special projects fund for fiscal 2021. This is a reporting change only, so no changes to the actual day-to-day activities related to pupil activity or to the handling of those funds. For next year, fiscal 2022, we'll be implementing new guidance related to leases. So that's GASB number 87, and the district is currently gathering information to determine exactly how this will affect your report for next year. So we'll talk about this lots more once we have some additional details. So as you know, we are required to perform a single audit every year. That's the additional compliance audit required by the federal government for all entities that expend greater than $750,000 in federal awards in a single fiscal year. And so we use the federal guidelines in determining which specific federal programs we test each year. This year, we looked at IDEA, we looked at ESSER, and we looked at the Commodity Supplemental Food Program. For IDEA and ESSER, we did report a significant deficiency related to the gathering or the lack of documentation of time and effort. We do note, though, that an important factor here was that the employee that is typically charged with oversight for that ESSER time and effort reporting was out on extended medical leave. And, you know, just one of the many things that has been a challenge this year as we've been continuing in this pandemic environment is that, you know, that is increasingly common, medical leave, quarantines. And so the district has really met that challenge. And while we do have this finding, I think that really it's remarkable that you know that the district did so well in all other areas because it certainly has been a challenging year for all of us. So in addition to the audit reports, we also issue a management letter each year. That's required communications from us to management and to the board. But this is also an area where from time to time, we will have recommendations that we think are significant enough to put in writing, but that don't qualify as findings for report purposes. And so this year we do have one recommendation, and that's really just to keep in mind the inherent risk related to the pupil activity funds. Anytime you're collecting or dispersing money in a disaggregated manner, in the way that you are collecting funds at all of your schools, in classrooms, that presents a higher level of risk. And so we know that the district has has established good controls, good policies and procedures related to these funds. But even with those controls in place, that doesn't fully mitigate the risk of misappropriation or of error in the way that these funds are handled. So we just think that it's an important thing to keep in mind that there is inherent risk related to those pupil activity funds, and that's true for all school districts. So in conclusion, again, unmodified opinion, strong financial condition, and it's just so important that you continue to make good strategic decisions for the district. Keep in mind these increasing fringe benefit costs, and make good strategic decisions when you're looking at your personnel, so that you can maintain that healthy condition for years to come. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any questions from any member of the Audit and Finance Committee?
I don't know if you want to tackle this, Emily, or Don, if you want to tackle this, or if we want to tackle it later, but just want to get more color around the significant deficiency and the path to remediation and how straightforward that process might be or might not be.
Yeah, I'm sorry, which process is that, Mr. Griffin? I missed that.
The significant deficiency around the time and effort documentation.
Yeah.
Just want to get a sense for what the path for getting that remediated looks like, and just making sure we're going to be on track to make that happen.
Yes, so I can't comment on that now. So I believe that the district has adequate processes in place to make sure that on these federal grants that we are tracking appropriately the time and effort on the contracts. As Emily indicated, we had a situation with an employee that had a long-term medical impact and had to leave for long-term, and we missed the transition when she left, sort of like immediately, and so we missed that transition. So that was a one-off, I believe. However, in this year, fiscal year 22's internal audit plan, we have two major audits that are planned. One is underway currently, and that one that's underway is the federal review of the federal program. So this finding relates to federal programs, and so once the Elliott Davis audit firm releases that report and give us the results of that audit, we will know for sure. The committee will know for sure if there are some deficiencies that we need to pay closer attention to beyond this one, and then we'll have that information. And if not, you'll have the information that things are adequate.
Thanks, Don. And Emily, does that all seem satisfactory and on the right track from your perspective?
Yes, that's consistent with what we've seen.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. My question, I don't know if this is for Don or for you, Emily, but would it be possible for us to get copies of your presentation maybe in the future, so that the committee, not sure what the protocol is for that, but if it would have been nice to have had the presentation, at least for me, it would have. So if we could get that in the future, that would be helpful.
Yes, we'll provide that. And so Emily, if you make sure I have the latest version, I'll get that to the committee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee?
So I have a question. I'm 10 years into this, and I'm on the 10th year of having our auditors talk about pupil activity funds as being a place where we've got weaknesses. Why aren't we shoring that up?
Well, from my perspective, I think that the issue with pupil activity funds is that because you're collecting, at schools, because you typically have one bookkeeper at each school, some may have two, but oftentimes there is a lack of segregation of duties there. But anytime you're looking at risk, you do need to do some cost benefit analysis. So in order to really mitigate the risk related to pupil activity funds, you would really need at least two bookkeepers at every single school. Is that cost effective? Most districts would say no, or for most schools, just based on the amount of dollars that are running through these funds, because it's typically not a significant amount, on looking at it from a district-wide basis. And so that's the reason that typically you do have some risk in the pupil activity funds, and it's a risk that you need to be aware of, but there aren't necessarily concrete steps that you can easily take to mitigate that risk.
So maybe this is a conversation for another time, but I think what you need is, I don't know that you have to have two bookkeepers in every school collecting cash as much as you need to have a two-part system that could have itinerant floaters that could handle some of that. I just know that all of the things that have cost us public angst and lost money are the small things that always seem to get abused the most. Nobody's going into ESSER and taking out $4 million. It will get noticed. But my concern is that we keep, when there's a cost benefit analysis, it seems to be that we're not considering the lack of ability to control that when it gets out of control. And that may be something for Don to discuss at a later time. It goes back to the same thing as the lack of documentation for time and compliance, because one person was on FMLA out of a 4,000 employee organization. So I just caution on those, because they're the places this isn't theoretical, they're the places we have always experienced loss of trust or loss of money or people losing their jobs.
Any comments from Don or so noted?
Yes, so noted, and we certainly, Ms. Coates can spend some time, with my staff exploring some of the processes that we have in place and the procedures that we have in place, and whether or not where the opportunities are to shore those up.
Any other questions? Emily, thank you for your time and your presentation.
Thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon.
You too. So the next item is the capital program 2017 through 2022 capital program. Ron?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So my department continues to execute our capital maintenance sales tax program. And as you know, as projects are completed and savings are identified, we seek alternatives for the use of those remaining funds. And so in this case, we've got 15 projects listed that are complete, and we simply propose to reallocate the additional funds to the completion of another project. And that's simply a reallocation as shown on the attached resolution, ma'am.
Does anyone have any questions about any of the specifics that were listed on the two attachments as to the reallocation of funds?
Motion to approve.
Second? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, Ron, go reallocate those funds.
Yes, ma'am. Will do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Continued funding for donation of washer and dryers. That's you too, Ron.
Yeah, that's me too, ma'am. So in accordance with your board policy, KCD, where we have to come to you for approval to accept donations that obligate the district to additional funding, we're hereby requesting approval to accept these donations of washers and dryers that are going to obligate the district to additional funding to install the washers and dryers at the 3 schools listed there at a cost of about $58,000. And so, and similarly, I'm also requesting in the first sentence at the end of that first paragraph that in the future, if possible, that you give us approval to do the same kind of thing up to a limit of $25,000. And we get donations for washers and dryers, which we do occasionally. But we would have the approval to go ahead and do the work to install those. But that's it in a nutshell, man.
Did I hear you correct? 58,000 to install?
Yes, ma'am. And that's for all the ancillary work required to create the connections where you can hook up a washer and dryer. So so it's power, water, sewer, and a vent. And I have quotes for all three of these to support that. In many cases, what might seem like a great location to install something and works really well for the school in terms of where that washer and dryer will be and its access to staff and occasionally the public. It seems like a great place to install it. And then, well, you got to have power, sewer, water, vent, et cetera. And that can be costly to install. So that's the proposal for us.
Move to
Do
approve.
you need a motion? Oh, sorry.
But just before we get that motion, I just had a question about how are the schools chosen? That's where I'm assuming the district provides guidance to the company that's donating the washer and dryers, or how are the schools chosen?
That's an excellent question. I'm not, I can give a little background, or Mr.
I was
Booker.
just going to add, Mr. Crom. So in most cases, the school leadership is either approached by a firm or actually they make connections with the community, and they're normally donated directly to the school from a company. So in all three of these cases, I'm pretty confident in all three of these cases, the school principal took the initiative with the donator.
It was definitely the case in North Charleston High School. It was moving with the military. It's in that first paragraph. And then Whirlpool Counts was or Care Counts from Whirlpool was the other donor. And somehow they were connected with two schools.
And is the primary anticipated use of this for the community or for the school?
So in most cases, for elementary schools, most cases they're used in situations where a child might soil themselves, and to prevent embarrassment of having to go home, that they have an extra set of clothes, they put the kid in, wait for the clothes to be washed. That's what the usual elementary school is. High school's case in North Charleston, it's twofold. Number one is you do have families which don't have regular access to washers and dryers, and a child might actually bring in a basket of clothes, and during the school day, they'll go home with a clean set of clothes for the rest of the week, basically. But I think Mr. Darby anticipates using the North Charleston for community. He does have a pantry set up in the school as well. So it's really developing a community atmosphere at North Charleston High School.
And that was why I was asking, because I was pretty sure I knew this one was coming through for the community. Do we have, are we making sure that we're maintaining an appropriate separation between the community and the functions of the school? Just staffs, I mean, basic campus security.
So I don't know if all of the use is after hours. If it's after hours, it shouldn't be an issue. If it's during hours, the community members are, I would truly believe they're put through Raptor before they enter the school. So there is a clearance involved in allowing them in. But I don't know the specifics of when and where they're actually using. They would use it at this point.
In the case of North Charleston High School, it's the two classrooms that are at the extreme northeast corner there at Montague and Jenkins. So in anticipation of relocating the front office to that side, the East Montague side of the high school, which is
So you're severely overestimating my ability to know what north is.
Sorry.
And I'm literally looking at the campus. I know that the communities and schools, and I know there's a separate entrance. There's the main front door where the kids walk in, but there's kind of a separate door down along Jenkins, along the side of the North Charleston High School that parents can come into for their, I think that's where the community liaison is. Are you referencing that area with the separate entrance?
It's the corner up nearest to the CAS. It's the corner nearest to Jenkins and Montague, that corner.
Got
right
it. That is it. That is it.
Yeah. So he's trying to facilitate easier access that's more controllable.
So the other cost that goes along with having the washer and dryer, where do those costs go into? Whose budget does that go into? Like the increased water, who supplies like the detergent? Where are those types of costs coming from, and is the school district responsible for that?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm covering the utilities, water, sewer, electricity, in my annual budget, my annual GOF. And I presume there's some funding at the school where they're buying the detergent. I'm not sure, but I would think GOF would be covering that in one form or another, or some other donation.
Any other questions regarding the wash and dryer? We know how many, does anybody know how many do we have in the district?
I will find out for you, ma'am. I would guess a dozen or so, something like that,
Okay.
but I'll find out for you.
Okay, thank you. You can just send me an email. Thank you so much. And so we do need a vote on this particular item because of the expenditure of funds and going forward, as long as staff doesn't have to exceed $25,000, they won't have to come back to us each time for approval. So I'll entertain a motion to that effect if you all are in agreement with that.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I would ask that when we do these things where we say that they do not have to come back and request permission, I agree. There's no reason for this to be a vote, but I also think it is something that we need to be aware of. So communicating when these happens is not mutual. That didn't go off the table because we said you didn't have to have permission to do it.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. So notification when we intend to do it. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Ron. The next item is fixed cost of ownership. Mr. Barori.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So I have a 58 slide brief, and I know y'all love pictures, but I know y'all don't want to listen to me talk about things that I love for an hour. So if Maggie
Motion to
can share-
approve whatever it is he wants.
So if Maggie can share screen, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. I would encourage you to take a look at your board documents so that you can see the full brief. Our team takes great pride in what they've done, and we've got some really good we got some really good pictures. We got some really good pictures in there. If I can close this and I can move this out of the way. So this is a recap of the FY21 fixed cost of ownership. We use these funds for repairs, renovations, replacements. The board approved this in February of 2020. We began work in earnest in the summer of 2020, and we're in the final stages of closeout. So this is essentially a year and a half ago. This is the scorecard that shows the work across the district broken down by constituent district, by level of school, as well as the number of projects. And then the lower right-hand corner, you can see that we've completed about 588 projects across the 13 program areas. And I'm going to show a couple of slides from each, not from each program. I'm going to have at least one slide from each program area. By far the biggest program is Mr. Kroms's facility management. It's a little over $12.4 million. And you can see by the list of projects here, he's all the way from on top of the school with roof repairs to underground storage tanks below ground and everywhere in between. A lot of great projects across the board, as well as replacing pieces of equipment for capital maintenance, AC controls. I listed COVID at the bottom, but I just want to clarify that we did get federal money to do most of the COVID work, but it did begin with sweep up money from this year to prepare for last year's first COVID year. A couple more slides from Mr. Kroms's FM program. Flooring is a difference maker. We did 9 projects this year. On the left-hand side, you can see the difference in appearance in Goodwin before and after, with some accent colors, some new code base on the right-hand picture. And then on the far right, he's got a great gym floor replacement program. That's St. John's High School shown there. One of the little-known programs is stormwater management. We've got 73 ponds across the district and nearly 50 of those are wet at all times. We've got to make sure those ponds are well preserved so they accurately, or they best drain the water from our school sites and don't send sediment into the waterways. And you could see some of the before and after pictures with the revetment repairs that are done here at Military Magnet and School of the Arts. We run playgrounds as a separate program, but it is under FM. This past year, they replaced 2 5 to 12-year-old playgrounds and 2 2 to 5-year-old playgrounds. Here shown as Oakland's new shade structure and artificial surface, as well as the relocation of playground equipment to James Allen Middle School to support Mitchell Elementary School. We do have a very robust maintenance program here with playgrounds, and that's grooming the turf, that's putting additional roll coat down on the rubberized surface, and maintaining and repairing playground equipment itself to extend service life. Moving on to the next program, security and emergency management. It's about a little less than 2.3 million. Most of the funds are spent on our camera systems. We have more than 5,500 cameras across the district. It's about a 10-year service life to replace an entire system. You can see we completed 9 schools here. They range anywhere from 100,000 to 400,000 a piece, depending on the size of the school. And Mr. Reinbach was also able to replace emergency equipment across the district as well with his funds. Another huge program is IT. Not only do we have information technology, we got classroom technology, which is shown on this slide, the network ops, as well as PCs. There is a combination between this program and the sales tax program, but you can see the extent of Mr. Naraki's system replacement here on the left-hand side, PA systems, UPS, audio enhancement, media carts, and on the right, district phone systems and other electronics, including servers. The software, which is not, there is no slide for that, but software across the district essentially managed as well. And we spent nearly $10 million on software across the district. Christy James manages our media program. These are pictures of Sanders Clyde's new library furniture, set up very much to be flexible and move things around to accommodate the types of organizations that are using the media center. With a little over $1 million, she was able to replace media furniture in 4 different schools, and also she was doing phase 2 of the large format printers in the libraries. She did those in 3 different areas: downtown, West Ashley, and on the islands this past year. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment, FF&E. Deb Luce manages this program. She filled more than 400 school requests for replacement of life cycle equipment, cafeteria furniture, stage curtains, lockers, exterior furniture. Here are pictures of Jerry Zucker, replaced the front office furniture, really gave the school an uplifted look, and she spends a little more than $1.2 million on her program. Denise Santos manages fine arts. It's really split between orchestra and band. Orchestra, you can see 14 schools. She outfits them with about $5,000 worth of equipment per year. And on the band side, about $7,000 at 14 schools that have band programs. Athletics this year was managed by Bob Olson. Safety is top of the line in the forefront, making sure that the gear is the right gear to protect our students. And that starts with the football helmets being replaced or reconditioned. And then gear is replaced in existing schools on a service life base. You can see wrestling mats, score tables. We actually installed a stop net at the North Charleston High School soccer field. Rich Gordon, our CTE coordinator, working with FM, handles most of these projects. We've got about a 3-year window for 2 very large projects, and that's completely gutting and replacing culinary arts equipment at West Ashley High School, as well as Military Magnet. This is the demolition of West Ashley. You can see actually digging holes in the hallways of the school. It's a huge project. The money in FY21 was used for design in both projects. in the start of this project on the demolition side. Angela Barnett, who heads planning and real estate, also manages our high school auditoriums. She uses these funds to replace equipment like stage lighting at West Ashley this year, as well as setting up the iPad interface at St. John's. The big project for this year's funding was completely replacing the Wando pit and stage. Transportation, Mr. Lynch uses these funds, nearly $1 million, to replace cameras and radios in the vehicles. We also purchased 4 new activity vans and 4 special need, not vans, 4 special needs buses and 4 activity buses. School nutrition, this is the first year we added the school nutrition program to cover equipment costs. We spent nearly $800,000 on cooking equipment, compressors and condensers, some purchasing additional reach-in coolers, and most importantly, replacing service lines at 12 of our schools. And lastly, I just wanted to mention the mission critical projects, which was a big portion of the FY21 funds. We had projects at 4 different schools: Mary Ford, Chicora, Meminger, and C.E. Williams North. Mary Ford, incredible difference. The FM team, you can see the before and after in the hallways on the far and left, replacing or covering the terrazzo floor, as well as putting in the school logo. The lower pictures of the gym floor, which is actually carpeted, now has the Mondo flooring and renovated bathrooms, along with access controls, HVAC, new furniture in classrooms, expanding classrooms, completely new front office. Mary Ford has a completely new look with the mission critical funds used. And subject to your questions, that closes the brief, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Jeff. Are there any questions? Please pass along.
I have a question.
To your staff, Jeff, for the work they've been doing.
Yes, ma'am. I think Ms. Stamp had a question.
Okay.
And Johnson Haggett Stadium, is that a city facility or Charleston County?
Yes, ma'am. Stony Field.
Yes.
Johnson Haygood is a Citadel facility.
Yeah,
Stony
I mean,
Field
Stony
next door.
Field.
Yeah, Stony Field is a city facility. We've got a joint project down there with sales tax funds. The district is installing new artificial surface, a new scoreboard, as well as a walking track. And the city's doing some work on the bleacher side. That is scheduled to be open next year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Jeff? Comments? Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, ma'am.
The next item is the 2021 annual energy update.
Yes, ma'am. Back to me. So this is simply an annual update I provide about this time every year on how we're doing in our energy program, which is very well. We continue to save energy and minimize costs, and that's largely due to our capital construction and capital maintenance programs, where we're recapitalizing facilities that are much more efficient to operate, from roof to HVAC to windows, et cetera. And also behavioral change by staff and students as we continue to promote energy conservation. We've grown, as you know, over the last, some of the highlights in the text, we've grown over 74% in our footprint over the years and seen a much smaller increase in energy use over that same period. And our energy use intensity continues to decline. We easily beat the state's goal back in 2020 and continue to improve on our energy use intensity. That is the energy we use per square foot. Also, a highlight is 26 schools earned the Energy Star certification for this year. So the energy program continues to do well, and this is just simply an update for you.
Yeah, this is very impressive. And congrats to those schools that are participating. Are there any questions for Ron regarding the energy program? Ron, thanks a bunch for bringing that to us, to our attention. Okay, the next item is the monthly capital projects report. Before we go there, I haven't seen the transportation report. Am I missing something, or did we change the frequency of how that's reported or something?
Yes, ma'am. I put it in the superintendent board brief along with an explanation before I actually started to do it. There was no requirement for that report to come to the board. I went back and researched when it was developed. So it is being submitted to the board every month. In fact, it's coming in earlier because we don't have to wait for the next monthly meeting.
Okay. So if anybody on audit and finance were interested in seeing the report, we would just, they would just let you know.
Yes, ma'am. I can email it to anybody.
Okay, all right, very good. Thank you. Okay, Joyce, capital projects report.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to present the September capital projects report. Our revenue collections for the 2017 through 2022 capital building program, phase 4, for August were 1.2 million above our 2% projected revenues. For expenditures for the 2010 through 2016 capital building program, phase 3, the expenditures were $200,000. For the 2017 through 2022 capital building program, phase 4, 8.7 million in expenditures. For the 2023 through 2028 capital building program, phase 5, 325,000 in expenditures. The capital maintenance program with 8% funding was $1.4 million. And our fixed cost of ownership fiscal year 22 program is well underway. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Any questions for Joyce? If not, thank you as always, Joyce. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, information and discussion of risk assessment, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, thank you. So this discussion is my request to the committee to, in January, to take a look at the Audit and Finance Committee charter and make a potential change. Currently, and for some time in the month of November, the staff was required to bring to the committee the annual audit risk assessment plan and the internal audit plan. As the committee is aware, a couple of years ago, we changed processes where we revamped how we approach internal auditing. And so now we have the external audit firm of Elliott Davis to handle that for us. Also, if you recall, June of last year, June of 2020, Elliott Davis presented their first comprehensive risk assessment. And at the very tail end of that report, they laid out a multi-year proposed internal audit plan. And so what we have done since then for fiscal year 21, last fiscal year, we selected 2 items for them to audit. That was the procurement audit and IT audit. Current year, fiscal year 22, as I mentioned earlier this afternoon, there's 2 audits planned, one underway right now, federal programs, and then after the beginning of the fiscal year, payroll. So both of those are really significant internal audit programs. So with the risk assessment out there, with the audit plan already in place in fiscal year 22, as I reviewed that in preparation for this meeting, it seemed more appropriate to change the date that we would actually develop the internal audit program for the upcoming fiscal year. And so I would propose that we do that revamp in January. This coming January is when we were supposed to review the charter. And at that review process, I will be proposing that we change the timing of the risk assessment and the internal audit plan until sometime in the spring. I'm not sure which month would be appropriate, April, May, but sometime in the spring, and that would position the district for the following fiscal year's internal audit. That will give us an opportunity to work with the audit firm to plan that out, and then also take a look at what the frequency would be for them to come back and do a refresh on the overall comprehensive risk assessment. So that's what I want to present to the committee this afternoon. Get your questions and concerns, comments, so that I know how to proceed when January comes in terms of review of the Audit and Finance Committee charter.
Are there any questions or concerns about Don's proposal from anyone?
It sounds reasonable so long as it's annual. I think whenever is most efficient and effective for the team, and doing it in advance of being prepared with your budget for the following year seems to probably help your budgeting process. So it all makes sense to me.
Right. I mean, if I were to bring an audit plan to you right now, it'd be for the current fiscal year 22. So we already have that in place. So yeah.
Any other questions for Don? We don't need to make a motion on that, just provide it. Okay. All right, John, and I think you've got your marching orders. So the next item is the annual budget calendar.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. So presented in the Audit and Finance Committee packet is the annual, the proposed, not proposed, but the draft calendar for fiscal year 23 budget. We'll spend more time with that calendar in January. The things I want to point out this afternoon are the timeline calls for the adoption of the budget in June and the first reading in May. So consistent with the last 2 years, a couple of years ago, we tried to move that up, and that didn't work. So we'll just go ahead and stay consistent with the timeline of meeting the state's requirement of June for the adoption of the budget. Currently in with the cabinet on the calendar, it shows 3 dates between now and the winter break on December 17th that the cabinet will be spending time looking at the strategies that we want to bring forward for fiscal year 23. And then in January of this coming January with our Finance Committee, Finance team will present preliminary revenue projections and our preliminary thinking on the strategies. We would refine that in February, and then we'll move forward through the normal process of the budget development. So right now, again, it's just for information. I'm certainly open to questions, but it follows the flow that we have used in the past couple of years, with an emphasis in December of trying to focus a little bit more focus on the strategy before the holiday break versus after the holiday break.
Any questions for Don on the calendar? Don, is there any concerns that you have in terms of anything that's on here with deadlines and et cetera, et cetera?
No, there are no concerns. I mean, in terms of the revenue, we depend on the state legislators to get that information out. With the local revenue, we work. My staff works very closely with the county auditor's office. So, and so I think right now I don't have any concerns about timelines.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The monthly financial update, Mr. Kennedy.
So I have that on my screen. This is it represents the first monthly. It represents the first update for the current fiscal year. If you recall, I don't present the first update until the end of the first quarter. So this represents financial information through September. And the reason why we wait until the first quarter, because school doesn't start until late August. And so much of the expenditures that we began to incur that does not occur until towards the end of the first quarter. So in presenting the monthly financial report, there are two formats that I use. It depends on the time of the year. And so at the beginning, between this report running through the report that I will present through December, through November, revenue and expenditures through November, was simply compare the budget this year, year to date, to where we were last year, year to date. So what's on my screen here shows the FY22 approved budget, the full budget. The next column shows actuals through the end of the first quarter, 9/30, in terms of revenue and expenditures. And then we compared that to the actuals through same time period last year through the first quarter of 2020. And then we do a comparison just to make sure that we're not seeing anything that we would not expect to see. And that's the case this year. We have increases in revenue. There are notes down at the bottom that explains that we have more revenue this year than last year in the budget. And then there are expenditures that exceed last year. But again, there are explanations for that. We have new schools that came on board as an example, so we had more labor than we would have had last year. So we're not seeing anything that of any concern here, and I don't expect any for the next two reports anything to be of concern. What's important though is that we make a shift at the end of the second quarter. So once we close the books for December this year, like we've done last 2 or 3 years, when we report the monthly financials as of 12/31, then that's when we shift to actually doing year-end projections. So we will bring to the committee what we project to be our revenue numbers at the end of the year, and what we project rather our expenditure numbers to be at the end of the year, and how that the differences between those numbers would impact the fund balance. And so we will refine that type of analysis each month rather, going through the month of May, so that when we get to the month of May, there would be an expectation of what we report to the Audit and Finance Committee would be pretty close to what the external auditors would report in the fall of when they issue financial statements. And I would say that the numbers that were presented by Emily Sobchak this afternoon with Green Finney, the $146 million of fund balance was exactly where we were expecting when we reported at the end of the back in May, June timeframe. So what questions do you have?
Any questions for Don about the financial update? All right, Don, nobody's having any questions. So we will move on to the last item before we go into executive session, and that's a request for extension of a TIF, and Don is going to explain that to us.
So last week, we received from the city of North Charleston a request to extend an existing TIF, the Norset Community Redevelopment TIF. That TIF was put in place in 2001. It's currently scheduled to expire in the year 2028. And so what the city is requesting the TIF participants to do is to extend their participation from 2028 through the year 2041. And so we have a letter from Mayor Sumner in the package that makes that request. On my screen here, it shows it's a schedule here that was put together some time ago. So this is not something that we estimated in the last week. This is our estimates going back probably a few months. And it shows here at the bottom here, hard to see in the highlighted, but North Charleston, Norset TIF ends 2028. Here in this first column of numbers here, where it says FY21 actuals from the Treasurer's Office. So this is actual dollars, revenue dollars that were collected on the assessed property values for this TIF for last fiscal year 21. And here, this $2,1,992,000 is the amount that was collected for the Norset TIF that would have come to the district had we, as district revenue, had we not been participants in the TIF. So those are actual dollar amounts that have been identified by the Treasurer's Office. For fiscal year 22 and beyond, through the end of the life of the TIF, 2028, the numbers here for the Norset TIF are estimates that my staff, using whatever appropriate measures to do the estimates, we have estimated. And you can see each year there's a rise in the anticipated lost revenue to the district over to the final year of the TIF, which is fiscal year 28 here, this last column. And it shows that at that point, we would estimate that the district would lose $7 million in revenue. If we were to extend beyond 2028 up to 2041, we would update these projections, and I would anticipate that as the value of the assessed properties increased here in the Norset community redevelopment area, that this lost revenue would continue to increase over the succeeding 13 years. And so the TIF policy that was adopted by the board last fall said that if there's an existing TIF and the district is requested to participate in an extension, the policy is not to participate unless there are compelling reasons that would benefit the district. And so the recommendation that I'm proposing to the committee is that there are compelling reasons that we should not participate because of the continued lost revenue. What questions do you have?
So Donna, I'm supportive of your general position to not support the TIF. But I'm curious, what drives the 25 and the 19% growth? What is that growth assumption? Is that the assumption of the annual increase in property values in that area? Is that, or what is that growth assumption about?
That's correct. So my staff, and to some degree I do also, but primarily Jackie Carlin works very closely with the county auditor's office so that we can make sure that we understand assessed property values and what the growth rates are. And so for instance, when we bring to the committee and to the board for the general operating fund, the budget for each year, we based our local revenue on those assessed property values. And we tend to be ultra conservative on those projections. And so, and the reality is that over the last X number of years, wherever the X is, it's been just going back a while, the conservatism of our estimates have proven to be just that, very conservative. And so the local revenues have come in higher because the assessed property values have been higher. So we have to be, in fact, I sign a document with the county auditors every year because we have to be in agreement that the amount of local revenues that we're going to generate. But when we do the projections on something like this, the unknown of what the future looks like, we don't have to be as conservative in terms of saying that the assessed property values are going to be low, because historically we look at the growth of these property values. So if you have an area right now that's already developed, you wouldn't see this type of growth. But as you have the redevelopment of an area, then you would expect to see rapid growth. And so that's what we're basing those percentages on. As I indicated a few minutes ago, this is a schedule that we did some time ago, so I didn't go back and revisit those projections, but that would have been the basis on how we did that.
And I wouldn't suggest going back and revisiting, the assumptions. But 20% every year for 7 years, it results in a very substantial, obviously a substantial total growth, tripling in 7 years. It's a big number. But even if you assumed it's status quo, $2 million a year is a lot of foregone revenue that I'm not sure we get the benefit of in terms of the TIF process itself. So I have no other comments. I'm supportive of Don's position.
Don, help me understand, make sure I'm understanding this properly. And 7/30/21, from this project, we received about $2 million. Is that right? Is that what we actually received?
So what that means, Ms. Green, is that the county treasurer collected of $2 million on this revenue that was on our behalf. That $2 million did not come to the district.
We didn't get
They
it
went to pay
because-
whatever bonds or whatever it is that we agreed to in the TIF in 2001.
Gotcha.
So the city would sell bonds to do the redevelopment, and that went to repay those
That's what
notes.
we would have got.
That's right.
Right, okay. All right, I'm still slowly trying to understand TIF, y'all, so bear with me. Are there any other questions of Dawn about this particular request this particular tip request and his recommendation to the committee? Stephen, I see you shaking your head. Okay. So based on that, I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Okay, thank you, Don. That concludes, well, let me just make sure. Does anybody have any questions, comments before we go into executive session? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session on a contractual matter.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so anyone who has not participated in this particular action item is excused. Thank you for being here in case you don't come back. letting you know. We good? Okay. So we are back. The committee within executive session on a contractual matter. We had discussion about the matter, and now I will entertain a motion regarding the contractual matter that was discussed in executive session.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so that item is approved. The board agenda items to are 4. John, you following me? You and Trina following me?
So the four won't go until
Will
December.
not go.
Until
Okay,
December.
Okay.
So item 5 for action,
Okay.
item 6 for action,
Mhm.
item 8 for action, and item 9, the executive session for action. And then for information, item 7, is stock ownership. Item 8, the energy update. I'm sorry, yeah. Item 9, the Muffin Capital Projects report. Item 12, the monthly finance report, and I think I misspoke, and still action on number,
Yeah.
it's
okay.
number 13, no, number.
That's what I was coming back to you only. We only have the three action items plus the executive session. Is that right? Okay. Okay, so our next meeting is December 7th. I can't believe we are at this point in the year. And if anyone has any comments or questions? If not, thank you very much for your attention, and happy Thanksgiving. Almost impossible to believe that we are there, but we are, and I won't see any of you probably before. So I hope you have a safe Thanksgiving. And Dr. Postaway, I see you there in the corner. You got any comments?
No, it was a great meeting. I would love for Mr. Barori and Mr. Crumps to give their executive summary slides maybe at the December 15th meeting under superintendent's update, because I think there's some fantastic news there that the public would enjoy hearing.
Yes, I agree with you 100%.
Thank you.
Okay, thank y'all very much, and we'll see you in December.
Yep.